Right, just in 2 seconds, he's going to be here, everyone. I'm waiting for him to respond. Hi there, Sarah. Good to see you. Lovely. Oh, hi, Kev.
Hi there.
We've connected.
That's good news. I just had to go into the other room to ask someone to turn the washing machine off.
Oh, I'm pleased you did do that, and I know.
Politely.
I know. I've got the doors shut. The cats are away. The children aren't here for the moment, so I think we've got a little bit of peace and quiet. But Kev, thanks for joining us. This is
My pleasure.
really fantastic. So I mean, it's first time, and it's just to have you come on board in such relatively short notice and pose the idea about doing an Instagram live. I know you're a bit like as I was, but here we are. How are you anyway? How are things?
I'm fine, actually. Yeah, it's all a bit weird, isn't it? All the coronavirus stuff. I think you have good days and bad days, whatever you're doing or whoever you are. I think one quite interesting thing about doing botanical photography is that at this time of year, there are just so many things to photograph and there's so much to do. I suppose in that sense, I'm quite lucky in the sense that I haven't had too much time to dwell on other things really. I was very lucky to have bought lots of bulbs in the autumn time, which have all been coming up and flowering at this time of year. And I was also very fortunate to have a soil delivery for the garden and lots of plants which are going into new raised beds there. So I've actually been completely rushed off my feet for the last few weeks, and particularly with things like tulips and daffodils and other spring bulbs, it's actually been a very creative few weeks for me. So yeah, not too bad. How does your garden look? Is it
Well,
looking okay?
it's coming on okay. In fact, because of this time, I've had a little bit more chance to go and do a bit more of that weeding and go and prune the palm tree, which I was standing on two chairs with this great big lopper. And yeah, I know. The neighbours thought, "Gosh, you're not going to get a tree surgeon to do that." And I said, "No. I'll give it a go." And it was really satisfying actually for actually doing that. But now that
Right.
I feel it would be very apt to say, we do say thank you to all the NHS frontline workers, all the many people and companies who've been looking after us, from the delivery companies, the supermarkets, the doctors, the nurses. I mean, we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't because of this pandemic. And it's actually opened up other doors, which have been really exciting. But I just don't want to forget
Mm.
actually these wonderful people out there that are still looking after us, supporting us. So stay home, stay safe until we all know that it's okay to go out. And how do
Yeah.
you find, how have you been finding it, in these unusual circumstances, Kev? You say that work's been coming through, but tell me a bit.
Yeah, well, as I say, I mean, I do other types of photography as well, but particularly the plant stuff. It's just been a very good opportunity to get on and do a lot of the kind of creative part of the process. I find these days a lot of my activity is to do with going to shows or fairs or sort of doing kind of printing or framing, things like that. It's been quite good in some ways to have had lots of the kind of distractions just completely taken away,
Yes.
so that I've been really able to kind of focus on the plant photography itself. And hopefully the results of that will come out in the next year or so.
Absolutely. Well, I've got several questions, in fact, loads, and it's always hard to just pinpoint the few that I'd really like to ask you first. Also, to mention everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This is fantastic. My fantastic business partner, Anna, is also online. And if we've worked the technical side of all of this, don't know if we have, she will try and answer your questions. She's this Blakey Anna. I'm not sure if it will work, but do ask a question. We'd love to have any feedback on this interview and any questions you want to, ask Kevin, because maybe this is something we'll do again. But let's start. So I thought you might all be interested to hear how we both met each other. And gosh, it's way back in 2012, and you had the open house at home. And
I think that was the first open house I ever did in Dulwich. So yeah, 2012 I think was that year.
oh right, okay. So again, that's quite timely because that was the first open houses we'd gone to visit as well. So so we came to your house and saw your work. And you know, sounds a bit naff, but when you connect with art or something, a print, something special, you immediately have emotions and feelings towards it. And I saw your work and I was just like, actually, I don't want to walk out without choosing one. And the hardest thing for me was choosing which one. My beautiful Astrantia, can't pronounce that brilliantly. How do you pronounce it, Kev? Astrantia.
I'm not sure whether I can pronounce it properly either. That's the trouble with
okay.
A lot of people all have different ways of pronouncing them. I just tend to go to it with Astrantia.
Okay, so Astrantia. So I've got that beautiful print in my hallway, which I love. And then from there, we've obviously crossed paths at school because our children both used to go to the Hamlet. And then 6 years after that, Anna and I decided that we'd have our first open house, and that was huge for us. You know, becoming part of the festival. We're still very much involved in interiors, but having a show to represent artists as well as our own work. And that's when I went and approached you, and that was how.
That was perfect timing for me, by the way, because I'd been showing with another friend for quite a few years. We'd done a kind of group show together up in Overhill Road, which is quite close to where you and I both live. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to kind of show there anymore. The person I was showing with moved away from London, so it was just a perfect opportunity. I was thinking, should I actually come back home and do something at home again? But we're having loads of building work done, and it was all really kind of chaotic here. So it was just absolutely perfect timing when you asked me.
So the stars were aligned, and it worked out. And so since then, that first show we had such a good reception with the work. I think the beauty of an open house, and obviously, albeit virtual this time, but being able to come into one's home to see work on the wall, they can visualize, they can see, and it gives it a completely different feel. And in fact, I can just see behind you, you've got your lovely hellebores print.
That will be one of the ones in the show. That's in the largest size, which is the 30 by 40 inch print in a tray frame, so it's unglazed. So yeah, I thought it might be nice to have one in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well let's ask you a few questions. So, what was the main trigger that first got you into art?
The main trigger. I don't think I ever really had a sort of moment of revelation about art. I think probably looking back on it, I actually grew up in a very creative household in Southampton. My mother and father were both teachers. My mother taught music, and she was a piano accompanist. She would always be having people coming to the house preparing for exams. She would organise choirs, music festivals. My father taught design and technology. He would always be making things. He had an amazing workshop at the end of the garden and would create beautiful pieces of furniture. My sister was an artist. She studied ceramics. My brother was a great trumpeter. He played in bands and orchestras. So I think art was always around. You know, I think it was always an option, something that you could do. And I suppose by consequence, encouraged really.
So it's a hugely creative family. Is you know.
Well, I think if you've got creativity sort of in a home, you've certainly got the freedom to do it without really thinking about it that much, or you know, whether it's a sort of good or a useful thing to do. I think it was kind of quite self-evident. I think the sort of photographic part of it. My father, as well as doing hundreds of other things, he was a very keen, very good amateur photographer. And I can remember from a very, very early age. I don't know if anyone knows what a pantry is anymore, but
I
where
do.
we live, there was
Are
a
we of an
kitchen
age?
there's a little pantry for vegetables and fruits and things like that. My dad would take this pantry over every sort of few months and turn it into a dark room
Oh, wow.
where we would process black and white film
Hmm.
and produce prints. And I can remember really young, not just taking photographs, but that kind of uh, magical environment, a bit like you see in films sometimes now. Where the red light is on,
Yes.
you look into the tray, and the image just starts to appear. I can just remember that feeling absolutely magical
Yeah.
and being slightly freaked out by it, but also like genuinely
Mm.
struck by the sort of power of chemistry and pictures, and I think that must have stuck with me.
Yes.
So
It was almost
I
like
yeah, I guess
magic.
that's probably.
Was
Pardon?
it like a magic sort of becoming before your eyes? I mean, I've only done it once a long time, but when you actually see the image, sort of, it's almost like raising out onto the paper. It kind of bleeds in, doesn't it? It must have been
Yeah.
fantastic.
I think anyone who's done black and white
Mm.
printing at college or at school or whatever would be really affected by that. And interestingly, when in my photography career, when a lot of people shifted over to colour, sort of mid 1990s. I mean, I did quite a lot of portrait photography, which was commissioned and therefore had to be in colour. But I still remember doing a lot of black and white printing where I lived. I would always, in the flats that I lived in, there would always be either a bathroom that I would black out and do black and white printing in, or I'd actually have a dedicated room for photography. So I think that must have been because of the magic of printing
Yes,
that kind of really stuck with me for a very long time.
absolutely. And so, following on from that, what are you inspired by? What sort of, are there any key things, or what moves you?
Well, I mean, my photographs are of plants, and I think they themselves are inspiring. Um, I think possibly unlike other things that people might choose to photograph, um, the plant world is always in change. It's always in flux. So I think I do find that very inspiring. I mean, even this morning I went out and I don't have a huge garden, by the way, but the garden that I have got has got a lot of plants jammed
Mm.
into it.
Well, maybe.
It's a hodgepodge of plants, but I've got quite a lot of them. And the irises,
Yes.
which I've got 3 or 4 different types of iris, but the first iris is coming up as a fat, very, very dark purple bud. And that's just something that I just noticed this very morning. So yeah, I think obviously the subject matter itself. I think it's hard to do anything artistic unless you do
Yes.
genuinely love the subject matter. I think it really shows.
Yeah.
I think in terms of sort of artists and photographers, there's dozens of photographers that I've loved over the years. There's a photographer called Joel Meyerowitz who did a beautiful book a few years ago. It's called Cézanne's Objects. And he, as a project,
Yeah.
went to Cézanne's studio in France. It's obviously a museum now, and there are a lot of sort of jugs and vases and just sort of weird and strange artifacts that are obviously left over, that would have belonged to Cézanne. Anyway, Meyerowitz photographed these objects for the book just on a very simple marble surface with a very sort of kind of slightly kind of faded sort of slightly kind of imperfect grey background, but that I think has been quite kind of influential for me because fortunately I've got a new sort of really newly redecorated studio that you can see a bit of behind you, and I painted it a grey shade like in the book. So some pictures that I'm going to be doing in the future, I'm going to be experimenting with this grey background.
Gosh.
Yeah,
That's really exciting, Kevin, because I mean, currently the majority of your works, or all your works, correct me if I'm wrong, are on that fantastic dark background. So,
Yeah.
so shifting to that sort of that softer grey will, well, it will just produce an entirely different feel, emotion, and yeah, well, I look forward to seeing it. That sounds like an exciting sort of new path to be taken. And this leads me on nicely to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about the creative process that excites you most?
I think. I think you need to change. Really, I think change is probably the thing that I'm most excited about. I think when you start to feel things are a bit kind of static,
Yes.
I think that probably is not a good place to be. And I think probably the fact that photographing plants, as I said just before, they are constantly sort of changing.
Mm.
I think that is very helpful. So, in other words, I feel like I need to change and try out new and different things, but I'm helped by the fact that the plants themselves are changing. Plus, of course, it's a massive subject, is
Yeah.
plants
Yes.
and, the world. And I'm very glad that I've chosen something that is so intrinsically deep and has so much kind of potential. I mean, people that know my work, they'll know that some of the pictures are individual plant studies, some quite close up, and some are quite sort of elaborate or sort of complicated plant compositions.
Mm-hmm.
But I think doing those two things, plus it having lots of plants that I could either use now or in the future, there's just so much potential.
Yeah.
I find it very exciting.
Well, I think one thing that I remember you telling me was you had the still life all set up, and you had to quickly go and get a cup of tea, and you sort of whizzed downstairs, made the cup of tea, and you came back up, and a petal had dropped, and it was almost taking on that change, the whole composition you'd set up, and in fact that just brought on that was change, So I understand how working with natural objects, it's not, it can't be.
But by the way, it can work the other way around as well. I'm not sure whether it's one of the 6 that we're exhibiting this weekend, but there's a red tulip which I photographed, and it was beautiful when it was very kind of closed in that sort of cup shape. But as it opened, it got more and more interesting, and I was trying to wait till it was as fully opened as it could be, and I kept photographing this single flower over about 2 days. It was gradually driving me mad by the end. But anyway, I did do one shot, and I didn't really think about it that. I went to make a cup of tea.
Yeah.
When I came back into the studio, I kicked the table and I knocked half the leaves off, completely ruined it. But
I don't know why I'm laughing.
Fortunately, I'd been vigilant enough to shoot one last frame before I went to do my tea.
Yeah.
And it looked really good, so I was lucky.
Brilliant. I love it. So there must be clearly you've got a style, and I was just wondering what artists have influenced you over the years.
Well, too numerous to mention, really. I've mentioned some photographers, or at least one.
Yeah.
There are loads of photographers whose work I love. It's hard to know whether they influence you or not. I've done a bit of teaching in the last couple of years at the V&A, and one great advantage of that is that we're able, for the first morning of the course, to go into the prints and drawing study room, where they allow you to call all sorts of artwork from the V&A archive. That could be a book, it could be a set of prints, photographic prints, illustrations, paintings even. There was an amazing little painting that I called out one time that was about kind of this sort of size. It was tiny, and it was painted on metal and fired. It was ceramic.
Okay.
It was absolutely amazing.
Wow.
So the V&A is basically an absolute treasure trove of stuff that, genuinely priceless.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at those in the flesh,
yes,
by the way, anyone can do this.
Really?
You don't need to be a member of the V&A to do that. No, any member of the public, as long as they contact the V&A and they go through the channels of, filling in a form and sort of asking what they want, can go in for a morning or an afternoon and look at artwork.
Yes.
And some of the pictures, let me give you an example. Some of the etchings are produced as books, large format books that might be 20 inches, 24 inches large. When you open the pages,
yes,
the etchings would have been done.
Yeah.
They would have printed them, and then the books would have been made by hand painting every page.
Gosh.
So when you open the book up,
Wow.
you're looking at painted etchings. It's thousands of hours of work.
Well, that's that's a great top tip, Kev. I didn't know that, and to be able to, you must feel like you're in sort of a very special place to be looking at these masters, and
I thought it was for V&A members only, or maybe if you were,
We've got lots of people, Kev, saying how much they love the V&A. Sorry, I've interrupted you. We've got Scarlett, Vanessa.
Well,
and,
anyway, if you were to go to their website, I'm sure there would be information on how to go there. It's called the Prints and Drawings Study Room.
Brilliant. And in fact, we can write this on a blog post or some notes. We'll give some top tips from you, which people can sort of read up on about. And by the way, just thank you to all the people that are tuning in, because this is absolutely great. We've got Maya saying, lovely to see you. We've got V, and we've got, so hope you're enjoying this as we're going along. And Anna's been amazing commenting back for us, because I don't think I can multitask of talking, reading, texting. So Anna, you're a superstar. But so next I'm going to roll on to the next question. So really, is there something you can't do without in your studios? Like, is there a sort of a thing, or I don't know, you tell me. I bet there's something.
Well, there's obviously all the photographic paraphernalia that you need to photograph plants with. I have quite a lot of little sort of brushes and blower brushes and little sticks and prods that I kind of hold up the plants with, or generally sort of remove little sort of distracting details as I'm photographing them.
Yeah.
But I think probably actually the thing that I would find most difficult to be without, having done this for so long, is a radio. Yeah. I was going to say music and radio, but to be perfectly honest with you, in the studio that I had before in my loft, I had a record player.
Oh, brilliant!
I'm quite into vinyl, and I found it terribly distracting, and I actually didn't use it that much when I was working, because you'd spend ages, either changing the record or deciding which record to put on. So I'm much better off with a radio. So you just put it on, leave it. Yes. It's either spoken word, which I quite like during the daytime, or if I want music, it's someone else making the decision. So yes, desert island disc sort of object. Absolutely. Radio.
And then, brilliant. I know there are certain times when I like full-on really loud music, and other times just a peaceful silence to just try and collate my views and thoughts. There's one other thing I just wanted to ask you is how you have developed your style as an artist from when you started to where you are now. How do you feel that has gone, and your next sort of steps of how you're going to go?
Well, I think it comes back a little bit to what we were discussing earlier on, doesn't it, about the background and that book?
Yes.
I think there will always be new plants, and there will always be sort of interesting subject matter, and I think I will probably continue to shoot objects on black backgrounds, or the one you can see behind me is actually a slight progression from that, because that's actually the background. If you look carefully at the actual print itself, it's like a very, very dark painted grey canvas background. So there's a little bit of texture in there, which I think is quite interesting. But I think really moving forward, there's two things I'm going to be doing quite a lot of in the future. I'm going to try out this grey background and see how that works. Yeah. some very interesting lighting effects when I've been sort of working
I'm going
with it.
to interject very quickly because someone's just asked
Please do.
specifically about your lighting. Someone has just said he or she, sorry, I can't see the message anymore, loves the luminosity on your prints. And is there any tips for lighting? And I'm sure it's highly technical on the lighting side. So,
Well, I think a lot of it will depend on the subject.
yeah.
You know, one plant will be sort of will look good with one type of lighting. Another plant might actually look better with something very different. What I've been changing in my own work this spring is that to keep it simple, the studio that I used to have had very poor natural light, and so I used to use flash lighting for that, which was an extremely elaborate, complicated lighting setup with about 4 flash heads, all coming through this diffusion screen, and that was to sort of give the impression of a sort of natural light, really. Whereas in the studio that I'm in now, right here now, there is really good natural light. So I will be moving away from using flashlight to natural light. And, in some ways it's a bit of a nightmare because it's changing all the time. It's very different in the morning than it is in the afternoon or the evening. But I'm quite excited by that. And I think it's quite interesting that they're all going to be slightly varied now, my pictures. And I think in some ways, I think they'll be quite so consistent. I think there'll be something that will be looser and more natural about them. And I think I'm going to try and sort of marry that with having a similar approach to the subject. So in other words, probably not so much with individual studies, but certainly with the mixed plant compositions. I mean, I may continue.
When you're ready.
No, I may continue to do some like I have done in the past. I don't think that what I've done so far will just suddenly stop by any means. But I think you'll see more pictures accompanying them that will have a looser, more informal style, not just for the lighting and maybe the background, but also the actual content in it. And there's one of the images in the show that we're doing this weekend. It's called Mixed Summer Plants 2, and the composition of that is a bit looser.
Yeah.
There's a few little sort of dead leaves and things, and it's not so manicured, and I think that'll be the way forward for me.
Well, I've got 2 questions that have popped up as you've been talking, and it's fascinating hearing. I think people are really enjoying hearing about your process. And one person is asked, how long does it take for you to shoot one print, as in photograph one for real life?
Right. Okay. So let's talk about the one behind me.
Yeah.
We might as well. I take photographs of hellebores every year. So every year I'll have another go at them. So it might be an individual study, it might be a particular plant, and it may be a combination of sort of blooms like I've got behind me there. It really varies. There are some things where I've actually put a flower in or a plant in, and it's just looked right immediately, and that might be done in an hour.
Yeah.
I've also done stuff where I've tried desperately to get something out of a group composition that might be left there for 5 or 6 days, and at the end of it, and just thought, forget it.
Yes.
It was a complete waste of time. So it couldn't be more varied.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it takes forever and doesn't even work then. But I mean, what you see behind you, I mean, I would have spent probably a day sort of doing various different versions of hellebores on that day, either individually or in groups. I might change the container. I might use perhaps a large vase, and then I might do ones with a small glass or something. But yeah, it is quite time consuming. Plus, of course, you have to wait ages for the plants to be ready, don't you? So
absolutely. We've got one more question. We've got Maya's asking, Kevin, do you have a favourite plant or flower to photograph?
Oh dear.
I think the
No,
answer, yeah.
I don't really. There is a particular favourite plant I've got, which is more of a challenge than anything else,
Mm.
because I keep planting it. I keep buying them,
What's that?
planting them, and they don't seem to survive. And it's called it's called a ranunculus floriplana. Bachelor's buttons is its common
Ah,
name,
okay, thank you.
and
Yeah.
but basically it's a tiny little white flower.
Mm.
There's a print of mine called Mixed Plants 6, and it's the little white flowers in the middle of it. And they're a little bit like dahlias,
Mm.
but they are that big.
Oh, wow. Gosh,
So they're microscopic and incredibly difficult to photograph.
yeah.
And I hopefully one day I'll do an individual study of them. But there's something about that plant that's
Yeah.
so perfectly minute.
Yes.
Yeah, Bachelor's buttons. Look them up.
Well, do you know what? I think when we see a print titled Bachelor's Buttons, we'll all be going, way! Because you will have accomplished. And that sounds like a
Finally.
great challenge. And Maya's just saying, brilliant, she's going to go and find one. So, and in fact, I think that's what quite a lot of people will be doing, is quickly going onto Google and finding out a Bachelor's Button.
I think the boring name is Ranunculus acarnitifolius floriplano.
What we might do is we might also
I'll write it down.
because me and my sort of not being able to spell terribly well. Well, people have still been asking questions. Does anyone else have any other questions? Do keep them coming through, and I'm trying to pick them up as I come on. But one thing which is very close to my heart is I'd love to show and tell everyone briefly the story, because we've very much come to this point where about how you choose your plants, because you rocked on up one morning outside the house here, outside our front garden, and my mother was sitting having breakfast, looking out the window in her dressing gown, and she's like, "Who's that in your garden?" And I said, "Oh, that's Kevin." And you asked, could I possibly pick some of your plants from the front? And I was quite honoured, actually. I thought, wow, my plants might be sort of good enough to maybe photograph. And anyway, long story short, I don't know how easy you'll be able to see this, but I have this.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what I'd love to say about Kevin's work is you've got such a variety of different sizes. This is all going to be on our website of your pieces. So as far as interiors are involved, you can find a smaller size that you can pop on a shelf, or behind you, that wonderful. Can you remind me how big that Hellebores print is behind you?
That's the largest print that we do, and that is 30 inches by 40 inches.
Yes. So you've got a lovely.
That
Yeah.
That's obviously in the landscape format, but quite a lot of them would be portrait, but they would be the same size.
And I think, just so that everyone knows, or if anyone's new to seeing or hearing from Kevin, you're not limited to one finish or one frame. And one can explore those ideas. So whether your interior, like this one at the moment, is quite a sort of pale grey, you might go for one of your lovely dark frames. Or am I right in saying that one can buy prints as well? So you've got a lovely range of how one can purchase your work.
Yeah. I mean, the best way to describe it is probably just to say that every image is for sale in 4 different sizes, from A4 up to 30 by 40 inches. And people can either buy the print on their own if they've got their own framer, they want to organise their own framing, or there's framed print options. The one behind us is called a tray frame, where the print is actually dry mounted, but it's not glazed. You're just seeing the print on its own. But we also do glazed frames. I think the most popular ones at the moment tend to be, for this larger size, we do an anti-reflect glass box frame. But some of the smaller ones can be framed with window mounts.
Fantastic. And to sort of round this up, what I haven't said about the story about Mum is Mum since, after you picked the flowers, a few years later, passed away, and that was it was a shock for all of us. And so one morning I came down and I was feeding the cats, and there was an envelope through the post box, and you had sweetly put this print in a gorgeous envelope with a note saying thinking of you, and it was such a poignant gift, particularly because of the story of Mum having spoken to you, you having picked the plants. And I think that's what art can also do. It, you know, whether you've got an emotion or a link to a particular flower, as you said before, the Bachelor's Button, and I won't forget that name. And I look at certain prints of yours, and I've got either memories or links, and I think that's another beautiful part about the work, being so emotional and quite evocative to everyone. So thank you, Kev.
And in fact, Annie, that has another of my favourite plants in it, and I think that was one of your mum's favourites, which is called Brunera.
Yes.
And it has a tiny little blue flower, very similar to a forget-me-not, but
Yes.
slightly more petite, and it has beautiful variegated leaves. So that's another great. You'll see it appears in quite a lot of my pictures. It's an absolute beauty. It's in my front garden now in full flower.
It is stunning, and I'm not going to try and hold this up to the screen because I think that'd be a nightmare and no one will see it. But it is one of the most beautiful variegated leaves, and I feel my knowledge of planting and growing is slowly expanding. But Mum was fantastic and had a garden opening, so it's just anyway that link is particularly special. But thank you so much. This has been such fun, and everyone who's been following and listening. We've really, really, really enjoyed talking to you, and fabulous to have those questions coming in. Lovely messages that are coming up. Anna's been obviously typing away. She's been amazing. Marie, it's really lovely to see. In fact, that's Marie's work behind me here. A wonderful.
Yeah, that's great.
It's I think that's very important to me to be close to. And thank you. Maybe if you're interested, Kev, could we possibly visit you again, maybe in your garden or your allotment?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah.
Would you be up for that? Because I think people might be interested to learn and hear more, and your future works on the grey background, or however you're going to go, would like to maybe follow your path.
Absolutely. We could do something in the studio here if you like, or we could look at some plants in the garden or at the allotment. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add or tell anything to anyone before we call off?
No, I think we're pretty much done.
I think we're done. And just finally, I know I said it at the beginning, but very big thanks to the NHS, all the frontline workers, everyone who's been working hard to keep us all, healthy, sane. And thank you for everyone watching today. My goodness, this has been amazing, and look forward to doing it again sometime.
Can I just say thank you to you and Anna for all your help, and thanks for hosting it. It's been really good to be part of it.
Thank you, Kev. And Anna is actually, because obviously she would be right here with me, and she's just been a complete strength and tower behind all of this. So although not
thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna. Mwah, you're amazing. Right, everyone. We hope you have a lovely rest of the weekend. Do keep looking on Instagram. We're going to be posting more of Kevin's work throughout the weekend. Send some questions. Love some feedback. And take care. Kev, thank you again.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
Right,
Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye.